Hello, everyone. It is Lark,
And Kimberly.
and this is auto asphyxiation. And I swear to God, it seems like every single week, I feel like I'm really, really, really unhappy about something. I'm like, oh, I'm just so angry. Yeah, I'm so angry because okay, first off, just horrible, interesting things have been happening. But then I've opened up the New York Times and it has this article by Connor. I'm just gonna call him Connor because whatever, you can find his last name. Connor talking about why America should sprawl. And I was like, what in the manifest destiny hell is this? I, if I had an actual paper newspaper, I would have thrown it, but we don't have that anymore. It would have involved me throwing my laptop across the room. And I was just like, so, infuriated. And I think the thing, I was infuriated by quite a few things. And I'm kind of like in my own head, do I want to get upset at this Connor dude? Or do I want to get upset with my colleagues, comrades, whatever, in urbanism that literally pretended like this was not going to happen. For some reason, a lot of white guys or, aspiring white guys, I shouldn't say that, in urbanism, had this idea that urbanism is a neutral thing, like politically neutral. Um, okay, let's let Kimberly, your ideas. Is urbanism a neutral? Is the whole idea of urbanism does this feel neutral to you?
No, not at all. And it brings to mind a meme that I just posted on Facebook the other day that said, "You may not do politics, but politics will certainly do you." Everything is inherently political, especially urbanism and talking about development in an urban environment. It is going to bump up against political boundaries, political factions. Like, it's just not possible for it to remain completely neutral.
I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, and here's the thing: a lot of these people who are in urbanism, they have a lot of like one of the urban teens meme, you know, thousands of people, groups that are huge, 100,000 people in the group. We have a lot of like these social media groups. We have a lot of engagement. We have a lot of media projects. And this is not to insult them, but we have streets blogs, we have strong towns, we have next city, we have all of these things. And it was very, I felt like they weren't that enthusiastic about the election. They were kind of like, well, I'm not going to be that enthusiastic about the election because, we're not political, et cetera, et cetera. And I even heard, I went to a conference recently, I'll just say bicycle conference. If you know, you know. And at this conference, they were just kind of like, how can we appeal to this new administration? And in my head, I'm like, you mean how can you appeal to fascists? They're like, oh yeah, we could focus on the family. We could focus on. Well, I was like, oh, what? So how you can appeal is, oh, you're just gonna focus on the family and then make it I was very confused. I was very upset. And now with this recent New York Times, we should all sprawl. I'm wondering, we talk a lot about rural America and we kind of talk about the FA, like, oh, the shark's eating your face or leopard's eating your face. Well, I think with urbanism, the leopard is definitely eating their face. I mean, do you think this is a FAFO scenario here, Kimberly?
I think it definitely can be. I think that anytime that you try to curry favor with fascists, it's not going to go well for you. I mean, there were. I'm Jewish, and I know that there were Jews throughout the Holocaust that said, "Well, if I just be a Nazi too, then they'll see me as one of them, and it won't hurt me." And that's not true. The capos got shoved into cattle cars just like everybody else. They just got shoved in last. So yes, it is an FAFO scenario.
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to say. And here's the thing. To me, it seemed like it was so obvious that that was going to happen. It's like it was so obvious that that was going to happen. But they were just kept thinking. Oh, and also too, this has nothing to do with what we're just talking about, but it does not. I also want to acknowledge the fact that on Passover, the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania, his house was burned down. And I kind of think it's weird that no one's kind of mentioning that part. Like, well, it was Passover and they burned his house down. I
Yeah.
think it's a thing. You should maybe mention that.
While
Um,
his family was still inside, by the way, and it was a moderate Trump supporter that did that, from what I understand.
yeah, that's just it's just wild to me. And okay, like I said, that had nothing to do with what we're exactly talking about, because I'm not saying he was an urbanist or anything like that, but I just kind of want to acknowledge that that happened. Because there's so many things that are happening now in our country, and it's kind of like our media is, so in some ways, it seems like they're kind of missing in action, except to like fear monger, but not to tell us to do anything. But yet at the same time, there are certain incidents that are happening. They're not reporting on them. But to get back to what we're talking about, I have been in urbanism for probably like 20 years, possibly more. um, and I think about the fact that people have often tried to like shut me down in regards to like bringing up feminism, more so bringing up feminism than I would think race in some ways, because in race they'll just try to segregate you into a separate little category. But with like feminism, we're like, why don't you just have a women's group? And I'm like, I'm really not interested in having a group about. I don't really care about if you have a vagina or not. I care about the political lens of how you're looking at urbanism. Um, and I think that a lot of this was about funding. They were like, well, we don't want to seem political. We don't want to seem et cetera, et cetera. And but yet this is happening now. They're gunning for you. They got somebody from Los Angeles, from the New York Times, who is essentially, I almost want to like pick some. Let's he was just talking about Texas, and it's wonderful, and we're going to need to do this, and all of this kind of stuff. And let me try to see, we're talking about the climate, and it says the article frames sprawl as a solution to housing shortages, but how might expanding low density suburbs make worse the climate risk? And also, yeah, just think about this. If you don't have public transit to get around, how I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the climate crisis and sprawl? And, I think about women and like primary caregivers having to like work far, far away from their job. And I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
You're never talking too much. Personally, I think that Dallas and or Texas should not be used as an example for anything in the United States. I happen to actually like Texas. I've been there several times. I've visited people there. I have family that lives there, and Texas is a great place full of some nice people run by a terrible government. So I think that we should caution ourselves and not use them as an example for anything, because their grid isn't even like really connected to the rest of the country. Like they really view themselves as like a separate country there. But
Go ahead.
I also like when we're talking about housing shortages, I did a little research. I'm not in urbanism at all, but I did a little bit of research, and there are millions of homes that are vacant within the United States. There is a 6% of 2024 from the U.S. Census.gov. There is a rental vacancy percentage of 6.9% and a home ownership of 1.1%. There are approximately 15.1 million vacant homes, which accounts for 10.5% of the US total housing inventory. And so, my question as a person that's not involved in urbanism is, what about these vacant homes? Why aren't people in these vacant homes? Why aren't they buying them or renting them? There's a homelessness crisis in all of our cities. Why aren't we utilizing these vacancies to help them? Why are we continuing to build new construction when our infrastructure is crumbling and can't support it? And we already have so many vacancies that we could refurbish, renovate, what have you, to get them livable if they're not, or push people towards older construction rather than newer construction when they're looking to buy a home.
These are all good questions. I think one of the challenges is with often with these homes. Okay, especially in urban areas and you have like these high vacancy rates, they want to get a certain amount of rent for these properties. And so leaving them vacant, they can do a tax write-off. And so we need to also start looking at if you have a development and it's empty, you shouldn't be getting a tax credit. You shouldn't be getting a subsidy for your building being empty. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. They should actually penalize you for having an empty building in the middle of downtown Los Angeles or in the middle of New York City or in the middle of, that shouldn't be allowed to happen. And also, I think we need to like start thinking of different ways to look at housing. Like, oh, we could look at cooperatives. Who can look at. I mean, there's kind of like this whole idea like you have to have a single family home in order to be successful, et cetera, et cetera. But it's kind of like this: if you can't, if you have no community, you're so far away from each other. I think about an article that I wrote about suburban housewives and how they were isolated, how, they are, even men in these situations, they're more suicidal, have more likely to kill themselves. You have these children who are doing various, I mean, this kind of Pollyanna view of suburbia is not the paradise that they try to make it seem. And there seems to be, and also too, this whole obsession when using Texas, which is trying to, essentially the worst, one of some of the worst pro-choice, anti-abortion. I'll just say anti-abortion. I'm not even trying to say like people want to get an abortion, they can get one. I hate this whole like, oh, we gotta say it in a way that's like whatever. If people, they're anti-abortion, it's killing women, and now it's they're trying to stop people from voting. And here's the thing: and this is something we've talked about a lot. Texas is not one of these states that they're ignorant. They actually fund their university system. They fund their higher ed. This is not a case of, oh, these are just ignorant hicks. No, they are malicious. They are sadistic. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that, they don't have the grid. So it's kind of like, how can I be as selfish as possible? How can I make it so that if you're poor, you can't get heat when it's cold? How can I make it if you're poor, you can't get if it's hot, you can't get air conditioning. How can I, defund your schools, make it so that you can't work? Of course, they're going to be in this administration, they're going to be touting Texas as some paradise, the Sun Belt as some paradise of places. And I think that's the amount of time Texas was mentioned in this piece from somebody who's based in Los Angeles is kind of wild, actually. And he's kind of like saying like, oh well, Los Angeles is he's talking about like, well, Los Angeles is one of is very dense, et cetera, et cetera. And here's the thing: Los Angeles is dense, but it's called dysfunctional density. It's not just about the density; it's about the community, it's about the planning, it's about the connection of people, and also we can't afford to have sprawl anymore because of the environmental issues. What you were talking about the infrastructure. Okay, we're if we build out, and he even talked about this in the piece, if we build out, we have to build pipes for the water. We have to build pipes for the water and for the gas and for the electricity. We have to build schools. We have to build roads. We have to build, all of these things that we have to build. And since this current administration has defunded all of the infrastructure, has actually stopped all the things that the prior administration had in regards to, I guess, Build Back Better, all of that, um, he has all that canceled. So who's going to be building this? Oh, his friends. His friends are going to be building it. Elon Musk is going to be building. Will be building this stuff. I mean, and then I think about I think about places like Barcelona and Portland, and they have these satellite towns. They have 15-minute cities, and they have satellite towns that are connected by the rail. You know, can can we think about like green belts instead of these sun belts? Like they seem to be obsessed with these sun belt towns, and what the reason they seem they're obsessed with them is because they don't have any regulations for jobs. Like you don't have you can work people like a dog. You can
Hmm.
buy them votes. You can trap women in houses. You can jail all the black people. And now we see jail the black people in the United States and then jail everybody else, the Latinos, like over in El Salvador. It's just horrific. I'm so disgusted, Kimberly.
It really, no, it really, and again, I have an aunt and uncle that live in Texas. My grandmother is buried in Texas. I think that if Texas wants to secede, we should just sort of let them, because you're right. They are funding their universities to be malicious and to do things in a malicious, undemocratic fashion. So let them do it. The only thing is that they won't leave the rest of us alone. They will insist on encroaching on more territory. So that is something that won't work.
No,
But
no,
you're
go ahead.
you were talking about how like single family home is like like the supposed like American dream, and we've that's what we're all focused on. And I think about like my family, both sides were raised in apartment buildings in the city for generations, and they raised families of 4 children, 5 children, 6 children, cousins everywhere, like regular family get-togethers. Everybody in the building knew each other. Like I remember that even from my own childhood. Like my grandmother, like literally, like if you wanted an egg or a cup of milk or something, you could go to somebody's apartment and ask them, and it was okay. It wasn't weird or anything like that. And I think of like the cooperative environment that comes from living in a shared space, like a big apartment building like that. And I lived in a big apartment building in Harrison. And I was excited to move there, but I was also a little disappointed when I realized that that sense of community no longer existed in apartment spaces like that. Like people were just, but I also think that's a very uniquely Harrison problem, because it's a bedroom community for Manhattan, and like people don't really live there per se. Um, but I think that a big apartment buildings are a hallmark of how many families in the United States were raised in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
No, you know what? That's so important because I'll tell you something. I think this is the thing, and this is something very interesting about urbanism. And so many people who are into urbanism, like myself, we weren't raised in apartments. And here's the thing, you actually were. You actually gave like a really good anecdote of like you working together and how how you guys shared eggs and you went and you hung. And also too, I'm just saying when I talk to you, when we talk to my friend, our friend Dulcie, also you guys were raised in this like a very similar environment, like an apartment building, like she was in Co-op City, and how you guys interact with the world is so different than people who are raised in a single like one of these suburban like coldest like these suburbs and this kind of like isolation like me you start being very selfish, and I think that there is very something to that. And that is what this, a lot of people kind of look at the metrics of like, oh, well, you can make more money this way. You can make, I think the fact that when you live like that, when you live in an apartment, when you live close together with people, when you live in a cooperative fashion, you aren't as addicted. You aren't as capitalism is not like your focus. You're focused on having friends. You're focused, and
Yeah.
I think that's a problem. I think working together, you're going to be less racist. You're going to be less sexist. You're going to be less classist because you're going to be around a variety of people. You have to ride the bus and the train with a variety of people. I know that people have kind of this view of certain things, but I think that that has a lot to do with this pushing of a single family home. And actually, at one point, they made it illegal for you to live with people who were not your actual family members. And that was something that they pushed because, they saw what happened in the Paris Commune, and they were like, we can't have that happen here. And I know people are kind of like, well, that's a wild like jump. Actually, it's really not a wild jump. Why are they obsessed with not having this kind of life? And why, like, there are different metrics you can use. You can use um metrics in regards to per capita emissions, access to services. You could be using those kinds of emissions, but instead or how far do you have to drive, how much public transit it is. But we're just counting like, oh, you can have a big house and we can make it like, and we can get everybody could have a single family home. It doesn't matter how much pollution is causing or how isolated you are or how it's just really interesting what they're choosing to count as mattering and what they're choosing not to count. Like having, health. If you're isolated, it's unhealthy for you. I bet you it's like funny, you live in like, Manhattan, the Lower East Side. I'm talking about a long time ago, like in the 70s, or even like the 60s, but we can back further, the 50s, the 30s. You probably could be an 80-year-old woman smoking, drinking, and you probably would live a long time because you have you have an
You have a
entire,
community.
yeah. And now people are dying by themselves in exurbs and suburbs, and they're seniors, and this is how they die. Like, you people didn't die like that before. People didn't die by themselves and in a house and far away from everybody, and then like, oh, they find them like a week, 2 weeks later. Like, people would people, if you lived in Co-op City, if you lived on the Lower East Side, if you lived in, all these things, and it's kind of like, hey, where's Miss Garcia? And they knock on Miss Garcia's door. Where is she? We know that her son's not here. We should usually look out the window. She's not out the window. Where is she?
Exactly, exactly. And that's, I think of like an incident like when I was still very young. It was before we left the Bronx. We had an elderly woman that lived across the hall from us on the first floor. And I remember one day my mother had come home from work and the woman's door was open slightly and she was on the floor. She was not she was conscious, she was not hurt like in any meaningful way. Someone had tried to rob her, but they heard the dog from our apartment barking. It's like our dog knew that there was something going on, so he started barking and it chased that person away. Just even that close proximity to people keeps people safer. Living in communal areas, in neighborhoods and buildings where everybody knows or sees each other on a regular basis, it's safer for people, especially elderly people that are living alone. You will notice when Mrs. Smith isn't picking her mail up every day. You will notice if her dog isn't getting walked, unlike if everybody's living in a 1 acre plot in a subdivision. You never see your neighbors anyway.
Exactly. And here's the thing. They act like that we have no other solution. Like, there are, and here's the thing. They use things like Candyland, like, sorry, the Candyman, that horror movie about the projects in Chicago, and they're like,
Yes,
oh yes. So if you live in it's if they're the only two options are single family home or the projects where people kill you. There is like literally like they don't show you any other way. Like, there are land trusts, there is co-housing, there's adaptive reuse of the offices and malls. There are so many things that we could have. We could have carbon, we could have a housing system that's carbon neutral, that's community driven. We can take away, decentivize the whole speculative market. There are tools, there are economic tools in order to fix this, but we don't have, the people do have the will. The people do have the will to do it. It's like we are allowing power to dictate the narrative of how we should be living. And the fact that this Connor dude got in the New York Times and did this. And I think this is a wake up call. to not just urbanists, but also to a wake up call to get urbanists to stop circle jerking, okay? Like just stop talking to other people, like talk to people like Kimberly, like Dulcie, like women who are like who take the bus and in SEPTA, oh SEPTA, they're cutting SEPTA service. 65% of the people who ride SEPTA are women. So who's that gonna hurt? That's gonna hurt women, that's going to hurt primary caregivers because 80% of women are primary caregivers. So you have this situation where the people who are planning, people who are creating these things, and the people who are writing about it are not the people who have to take care of kids, who have to go shopping, who have to rely on public transit. You have people who view this as a nice to have, not a we must have. And here's the thing, it's not just a nice to have for white men, it's a must have for white men too, because we have the climate crisis, we have a suicide crisis, we have a loneliness crisis, we have a senior by themselves crisis. And this is not something that's kind of like, oh well, that's an equity, a DII thing. Well, we all need this. This is not this whole idea of segregating into like this, oh well, this is just for those people. You are those people. And I hope now that men who are in urbanism, who are white, who are middle class, realize, yeah, you're those people too. You
Yeah,
are those people.
and and I would encourage them, like, like, stop, like, if you're writing about urbanism and you've never like experienced like some things that like people that live in urban environments have grown up there, or if you're not familiar with it, if you've never heard those stories before, I'm not saying you got to go get an apartment in the Bronx, but like maybe stay at an Airbnb there for like a couple of weeks, like just see, like, unfortunately, like I feel very much like, especially white men have a really hard time. They're so divorced from any kind of empathy that they really have a hard time of really putting themselves into somebody's shoes in their imagination. They need to experience it for themselves. Like I can take myself and I can be empathetic and be like, yes, that is terrible. And I should make sure with everything in my power that that doesn't happen to people. Even though it will never happen to me, I will make sure that it doesn't happen to those other people because I'm empathetic. And I don't think that white guys have a lot of that. They speak to things, but they don't have any experience of it, and they don't have any intention of gaining the experience of it.
And yeah, and now what I'm seeing now is there's still this kind of like, well, maybe if we just showed them that we could also, because I feel like sometimes I'm at conferences or in rooms, I feel like they're just about like, well, maybe if we could make it segregated. They didn't, no one said that, but it really feels like they're right about to say, well, maybe we could bring back segregation and then they'd be into urbanism. Like I feel like that it's like the obsession is the shape of the city rather than the people within the city. It's when, and this is something I've seen. I'm around people who are into trains and like the train and or hobby industry as they call it. And then one thing I noticed about people who love trains and models, a lot of them will have trains and they'll have models, and the trains and models have no people in them. And this is, I think, indicative of urbanism. It's very much what the city is shaped like, rather than how the people are moving within the city. And there is this kind of like, oh, it's like it's a toy. Like, look, this toy looks cooler, but not thinking this is an actual real thing that people actually really do, and people actually move around in it and they function in it. And also the earth is moving. The earth is not a toy for you to play with. The earth is alive. You can't just keep messing with it and messing with it and thinking that, oh, well, it's going to be fine. And this is, you know, I just think we should be more visionary in our thinking, and also think very more pluralistically. This whole idea, cannot segregate you cannot segregate and think that you have done enough for inclusion. If you have a conference and it's about urbanism, you can't have, okay, you have everything. You talk about zoning, you talk about bike riding, you talk about all this stuff, and then you have one section with every single person of color, queer, transgender people in one panel. Like like they're in one section. So essentially, you could decide, I don't really want to go to that one panel. Instead of having all of these issues mixed together, no, you have everyone who has who is doesn't fit within the white middle class man paradigm. They all get the white middle class man gets 10 sessions, and the black, Latino, Asian, queer they get one panel, and it's at the end, and it's on the way on the other side of the facility. So, and it's like, and they're kind of like, well, see, we did our inclusion, we did it. Like, no, you didn't do it, and the reason why you didn't do it is because now it's like, anyway, I'm just disgusted. I'm disgusted. I'm angry, and I don't even know like what to say. So, with that, do you have any other comments, Kimberly?
Well, I'm just looking through my notes here and just seeing if there's, I think that you're absolutely right that urban environments where people live together in cooperative formats are more tolerant and more healthy. Isolated people are unhealthy. White men are a very unhealthy group in the United States right now because of the male loneliness epidemic and because of isolation. And I think that, instead of playing Legos and building a little city and then adding the little people, you need to talk to the little people first, because you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to get people angry. And that's why people leave cities and look for more sprawl and more urban environment and more suburban environments.
Yes, talk to your own people too. Don't the whole thing shouldn't just be let me go to a hyper segregated community of people who are, who have been put upon. No, you need to be talking to your parents. You need to be talking to your cousins and your, it's not like, oh, that's uncomfortable. I don't want to have this urbanism conversation during the holidays. Well, you should. You should be uncomfortable. If you feel totally okay with going to Watts, Compton, East Orange, and telling people what they should be doing, you should feel comfortable going to Upper Montclair, Santa Monica, the Upper East Side, and also explaining to them this whole idea that you can just kind of just ignore your family, ignore essentially the white men that you're afraid of, so that so that I it's got to stop. It's got to stop. You have to stop the insanity, because now they've turned on you. They've turned on you in the New York Times, and sprawl is going to come back unless we can all come together and be together, not be separate, but be together and work together and listen to people who have the best ideas, even if they're not white men. Listen to people, even if maybe they have an idea, and you should consider that. That is it. And with that, we will we'll talk to you next week, and we are so happy that you guys hang out with us. Oh, make sure to subscribe, press that subscribe button on a YouTube. I know it's weird, it's YouTube, but it's a podcast, and we're gonna have one of those feeds soon. Okay. All right. We
Thanks,
have a good
everybody.
all right, bye-bye.
Bye.